knew what was going to happen, or we had a good idea about what was going to happen, and that would be bullshit. We knew Bill had a great look. He had credibility, but he was green, as I'm sure he would admit. And we brought him out in these short matches to help get him exposed. But the way we didn't anticipate, nobody did, how the crowd was going to react to him. And then once we saw that happening before our eyes, we went, okay, wait a minute. Instead of let's just bring him out for a squash match, maybe we've got to come up with a way to build on this character much sooner than we thought we would.
Why did WCW sign him to a larger deal in '99 after he already had a valid contract?
Because he held us up.
Okay. You booked him to win the WCW World Title. I believe it was Live Nitro instead of putting it on a pay-per-view and making fans pay for it. Was it more important to try to regain the ratings streak back from WWE at the time?
That may have been a factor. It wasn't the only one, but I knew we were going to be in Atlanta, and it was really Hulk's idea. So I don't, from that perspective of was it, did I do it on TV instead of pay-per-view to get the ratings back? That it wasn't my idea to start with,
right?
And I remember this is another one I remember specifically. I said, "Brother, I got an idea. Let's do this instead of that." Why? Bill's hometown. By that time, we probably had 25,000 tickets sold in advance already. We did like 45 or 50,000 that night, whatever the number was. And Hulk knew it would be a great moment. And I knew and I believed, and I went along with it because great moments on TV ultimately lead to great moments on pay-per-view. So I wasn't worried about the revenue. We were making money at the time. I was fine with it.
Bill Goldberg, easy to deal with?
No.
Why is that?
Intense. And by the way, Bill's a friend. So nothing I'm...
So he said, despite all of that, with the match, being on, helping WCW revenue-wise, Goldberg was not easy one to work with. So let's see what else Bishop got to say. Like I said, I'll pull up every way he says it again, but this is, I think, the second interview is more recent, him talking about this. So we'll go through it again. Let's see what else he had to say. Let's see. Ashes not distracted. Just appreciate that. Don P. Big Papa Pump. Salute to you. Let's continue with this interview with Eric Bishop.
Saying to you, I wouldn't say to his face, or probably haven't. But, again, go back in that time, Bill came in.
Too much too soon?
No, well, maybe, but maybe, but I don't think so. He came in he knew nothing about the business, but he was an athlete. He was intense. He demanded a lot of himself. He was a perfectionist. He had a short fuse, probably still does. And you put him in the environment of professional wrestling where you can't take anything at face value. And all of a sudden now he's being asked to do things, and he's got this guy over here in his ear telling him one thing, and he's got this guy over here telling him one thing, and he's got to deal with me who's telling him one thing. And all of a sudden you mix all that shit into one bucket and you got nitroglycerin. And that's what it was like working with Bill. Now, if Bill had been in the business for 10 or 15 years, this person over here wouldn't have had that much influence, or this.
Now, I could see that. Why? Because Goldberg had a name. He already had success in football, and he probably, that's where when you become a big star, any big star wrestler tell this, they're going to have some type of ego. Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, Goldberg, Warrior, you name it. So it's not surprised to hear this about Goldberg, but Eric Bischoff, he's on to something here. He got a point. Let's continue on.
Person, or he could have looked at me and said, "Dude, you're full of shit. I want to do this instead."
Right.
But he didn't have that foundation to kind of cut through the bullshit. So he had to manifest the way it manifests with Bill.
WCW finger poke of doom with Hogan and Nash. In hindsight, was it a mistake?
Yeah, clearly.
All right.
The reason you're asking me that question would reflect the fact that it was a mistake.
Right, exactly. So, what are your memories of that night?
I don't have any. Really.
You just want to forget about it?
No, well, that's not that. It's just it wasn't that big of a...
Yeah.
It's not like, the plan to introduce the NWO or anything. It was a spot. It was a match. It was a moment.
What do you think the legacy of WCW should be?
innovative. We were there. We were real. We were competitive. We probably were the reason, primary reason, at least 50% of the reason for the resurgence and the popularity of the sport to a level that it had never been before and probably never will be again.
What was your favorite and least favorite day working for WCW?
Oh, it's too hard to answer because there's, different things. But, I think probably one of the most fulfilling moments was Bash at the Beach when Hogan turned, just because of the level of heat and reaction that we got. And it was palpable. You could feel it. The least favorite was probably the night before I got let go.
Right.
It was probably right up there.
Once you realized WCW wasn't going to be your future, did you feel you were done in the wrestling business?
Yeah, I did. And I was fine with that. I certainly never would have anticipated having the opportunity to work, for Vince McMahon. And I had enough other things going on that it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do for a living? I've always had a lot of things going on. I've always, as you talked about earlier, spread myself too thin, but I've been doing that since I was a kid. So I had enough other things going on and confidence in my ability to do them that I wasn't worried about it. It just, I never would have seen any other opportunity for me.
Okay, that's Eric Bischoff talking on title match. He talked about Goldberg, how it is to work with him, the big name, the champ, and also the match versus Hogan at Nitro, where Goldberg beats Hogan in July 6, 1998. He defeats him for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, and he talks about how Goldberg was green on some things, how Goldberg was difficult, and he said he's cool with Bill. He says no animosity there. He was just being honest on how he felt. But like I said, WCW, I think with the whole thing with Goldberg, had Goldberg not built the star power that he did and win the WCW title at that particular time frame, whether it was a Nitro or pay-per-view, WCW would have fallen back then, my opinion. But other than that, though, Goldberg was like their bread and butter at this point, because Hollywood Hogan was a heel, NWO was getting stable, Sting, they was tired of him, DDP was starting to get a little old tired. So ultimately, before all those guys, who was the best guy to defeat Hollywood Hogan for the WCW title? It was Goldberg. And he was the best name to do it. And I would say it could have been done any other way. I mean, look how that crowd was that night on Nitro when he jacked them up for the jackhammer. Goldberg holding Hollywood Hogan for the jackhammer and defeating 1, 2, 3 for the belt.
Oh, hell yeah! 1, 2, 3!
That crowd was crazy that night. I mean, it was almost like a yes night. That type of-
Yes! 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 Yes!
That crowd was crazy that night. It was going wild. This was before social media era too. So, like I said, it was a full